Hi, this is Michael Waits recording live from the Singapore FinTech Festival 2024. Thank you for joining us for this special edition of Insurance for the New Possible, where we discussed the most innovative ideas in FinTech. Today, we are joined by Roy Choudhury, Head Commercial and Money Movement, Regional Southeast Asia at Visa. Thank you so much for joining us at the Singapore FinTech Festival 2024. How are you feeling today?
Thank you so much for having me, Michael. And it's just incredible. The vibe this year at SFF is magnificent. It's high energy.
Electric.
And there's just so much innovation.
There really is so much innovation, which is great because that's one of the things about which we want to talk with you. So let's go back to your title just for a second. What is your role at Visa really? And is your title really that straightforward, just money movement? Go ahead.
The short answer to that is no.
No, exactly.
It isn't that straightforward.
Go ahead. I like it.
But let me give you a little bit of a backstory to
Please.
this, right? So when you think of Visa,
Right.
we've had significant innovation and a lot of volume and market share in the consumer
For
ecosystem.
decades.
For decades.
For decades,
right?
yeah.
For decades. So when you think of paying a restaurant or buying a ticket as a consumer,
Right.
That's what you've known Visa
For sure.
and that's important. The innovation in that space has moved rapidly. You would have seen things at our booth, and we continue to innovate there.
We'll talk about that in a little bit too. Go ahead.
Absolutely. But our focus for growth is in the commercial and money movement ecosystem.
Okay.
Let me explain what that means a little bit.
Please.
So think about small businesses,
Okay.
large corporates, small businesses and large corporates selling and buying between each other. So supply chain volumes,
Okay.
procurement payments, governments paying for disbursements and scholarships. So anything that is beyond consumers paying card accepting merchants
Right.
is within commercial and money movement solutions.
So how does that work? In other words, are those entities using their credit cards to pay for these things, or is there an entire sort of symbiotic ecosystem and infrastructure that's been built by Visa to facilitate that?
Fantastic question. So if you thought of this even a couple of years ago, you would have said, yes, so this person gets a credit or a debit card.
Right.
More often than not, the physical credit or a debit card or
Right.
a prepaid card. And instead of being a consumer, they get a business version of it.
Sure. When I
right?
was at the big firm, we always had some kind of credit card that we could use, and it was one of the main credit cards.
Exactly.
Yeah?
And that is a corporate travel and entertainment card.
Always.
Right?
Right.
Now, as we have evolved, what we've seen with the advent of what we call the virtual modern credential,
Okay.
this physical card is
Right.
just a form factor.
It's just a representation of that, right?
So now you have a virtual representation of it, which is protected, tokenized. So when you are actually making a payment from that credential, the supplier who's receiving your money doesn't really know the original, say, the 16 digits
Right.
of that account number. So that safety, right? You don't want your primary account number, as we call it, going around the
For sure.
ecosystem. So that's one big shift.
Okay.
And because of this, we've seen the explosion of use cases. Traditionally, travel and entertainment, small ticket transactions.
Yeah.
And now, because of the needs and how innovation has progressed, we're seeing these payment and collection capabilities across procurement, supply chain payments, government disbursements, as I spoke of, and fundamentally the reconciliation of all this data when that payment takes place is seamless.
So give me this terminology again. You didn't say virtual card. You said,
Yes.
tell me.
Yes. So virtual credential.
Virtual credential. So are you suggesting then that unlike in what I'll call the old days, right, where I use my credit card to be able to buy an airline ticket, book my hotel, and just secure that kind of thing, that now if I'm a small business, I can pay my logistics provider. I can pay my suppliers. Because I've always thought about this. Like, why couldn't I walk in and buy a car? Particularly if my credit's good, right? It doesn't matter if it's $10,000, $20,000, or $100,000. That's my virtual credential.
Yes.
It's me still. I've always made my payments. So are you suggesting that businesses are now doing that?
Exactly. So few things there, right? One is businesses are using their Visa credentials.
Right.
Again, I'm staying away from the word card because card has had
Yeah,
this
that's why I want to use it, because I
connotation
want to get used to it anyway. Go
is that
ahead.
it is physical and all of that, right?
Sure.
And first and foremost, Visa has moved beyond the card. So now we move money through our network, and we are able to move money into a card, an account, or a wallet.
So how do I make that connection between my virtual credential? See, I'm getting
Yes.
better at this,
Yes,
right?
there you go.
How do I make the connection between my virtual credential and, let's say, my bank account out of which it's going to get dispersed?
So think of this, right? Today you have a bank account, and to access that bank account, you have a debit, prepaid, or a credit credential.
Yeah,
What-
or even just a digital representation of my bank on my phone.
exactly, right? Because whether it's physical or digital doesn't matter.
matter.
This is the virtual credential.
Right.
Now you're pulling money from a certain source of fund.
Right.
That could be pre-funded, or it could be pulling money from a bank account,
Sure.
which is money you already have, or it could be a revolving line of credit, which is what a credit credential is all about,
Right.
right?
Right.
So those are just sources of funds. And now traditionally you could pay a supplier with your credit card in the past,
Sure.
but that supplier would have to be a card accepting merchant.
Right. So that's why I asked you about the separate infrastructure.
And now we have yes, if you're a card accepting merchant, great. But even if you're not a card accepting merchant, which there are plenty in the B2B space, as you
Sure.
could imagine,
Sure.
you can still use your Visa credential as a source of the transaction, and the money goes into the bank account. And we do this via having Visa capabilities which are transparent to the buyer who are switching these transactions
Right.
into the bank account of the supplier.
Right.
So think about it from a supplier's perspective. And just before we came on, we were talking about what's most important to a business, big or small.
Sure. It's just increasing income, or at least maintaining their existing income, right?
Exactly.
But mostly increasing business.
Correct. So now, if I was a business and now I can receive money faster,
Sure.
whether that money is coming into my bank account, which I'm traditionally used to, or coming into my debit card, which is linked to my bank account, so
Right.
it's coming into my bank account anyway, I earn faster.
Sure.
If I earn faster, then the proverbial working capital gap
Right.
is lesser.
Less. So this is the working capital compression
Right.
you were talking about earlier.
So now we are focused on both the payment and the collection aspect of it. And I would even be bold enough to say the collection aspect of it is probably more important.
So a few
For
things
a
to unpack, if
business.
you don't mind.
Yes.
Let's talk about the working capital compression, because it's stuck in my mind.
Okay.
If my access to working capital compresses because I'm getting paid faster, what is the impact on my ability to grow my business as opposed to waiting, let's say, for 30, 60, 90-day payment periods?
Exactly. So spot on. Right? You're just getting me really excited, Michael,
Go
because
ahead.
these are the things that business owners think of all the time. Right?
They should.
So traditionally, if I have made a sale,
Right.
I would invoice my buyer after I've delivered the goods, right?
Right.
And then depending on the size of the buyer, I would say, okay, here you go, pay me in 30 days.
Right.
But to kind of actually make the sale happen, I would have had to buy supplies, etc.
Cost of goods
So my
sold, right?
expense, cost of goods sold. So
Yep.
my expenses have already kind of
Effectuated.
made.
They've been
they're
already
actuals,
impacted.
they're
Yeah.
real.
Yeah.
These are not virtual
No, I don't.
expenses.
And,
These
and
are
I can't pay my bills 30 days later.
exactly because
Right.
your terms will get worse.
Exactly.
So the faster I collect, which means the gap between my payouts and my collections
Right.
is reducing,
Right.
which therefore means now the funds that I have available can work harder for me, because let's say I had $100 limit,
Right.
and I was getting paid 30 days late. So I was using 30 out of that $100
Right.
to survive.
But also, if you believe in net present value calculations, then you have to understand that money I get today is worth way more than money I get
In
even
the future.
tomorrow.
Exactly.
Right.
So it doesn't diminish the ability or the need for having working capital limits,
Right.
because business owners always have a need.
So let me get a little technical with you, if you don't mind.
Yes.
It's not that technical.
Okay.
But if you were an up and coming fintech and you'd been in business for 3 years, you wouldn't have a multi-billion-dollar balance sheet.
Yes.
So to be able to affect this type of business, you'd need to borrow money or partner with a bank.
Yes.
Right. So in other words, if I were a fintech and I said, I want to do this working capital compression, right, I'm going to let my users essentially borrow money from me in the short term because I'm going to get paid in a month.
Yeah.
Right. But Visa has a balance sheet.
Yes.
So do you pay that out of your balance sheet? Because you don't pay it out of a bank, right? So how does that work logistically?
So first fundamentals, Visa doesn't use its balance. Visa doesn't offer credit. So the banks and fintechs are the ones who offer the credit, right? We're a network and we provide the technology and the connectivity.
You provide the
and the
piping that allows
capability.
this to happen.
Exactly.
The infrastructure.
Exactly. The provision of credit
Right.
or actual working capital will always be funded out of the balance sheet of a bank
Okay.
and a fintech, depending
Depending, right?
on the how
But you understand the
aggressive they wanna
genesis of
be.
the question, right?
Exactly. So
Okay.
we are the enabler.
Okay, I like it. So when you think about these all these products that you're creating, this is fascinating stuff.
Yep.
No, it's really interesting. What are some of them? What are some besides the working capital compression? What are some of the other products and services that you offer that you feel are like really innovative?
So I think we've fundamentally go back to the basics, right? So what, from a business owner's perspective, whether
Right.
you're a big business or small business, obviously the small businesses need most of the support,
For sure.
right? Our focus is to make sure you follow the need. And the primary needs that we see today, number one, how do I make more money, right? So how do I sell more? How do I collect faster? How do I manage my productivity so I'm actually more nimble, right? And efficient. And those are the areas that the business focuses on. We want to make sure that financial services is embedded,
I was going to ask.
right? Is embedded in those behaviors and operating solutions. So just as an example, today if I'm a medium to large size business or even small business and I'm using some form of a accounting platform or an ERP platform, right?
Right.
That's where I run my business.
Right.
Take SAP, for example. They're right here.
Yeah. Or NetSuite or something,
Or
right?
NetSuite.
Whatever.
The business spends time operating on it. So I have all my data, I have all my collection information, payable information, etc. on it. Wouldn't it be lovely if I could just use that information and from within that operating solution pay my suppliers?
Right, since it's already there.
It's already there.
And that's going to be the basis of actually all the receipts that you get and all the payments that you make.
Yes.
And they should net off in there as well. And if you can embed those financial services in there, so how does that happen? Is it
So
an
we've
API
just-
connect or like how does that
Yeah,
work?
so we've just done it, right? So now if
So tell
you're an SAP user and you have a Visa business credential, you can just lodge that into your SAP Business One, S4HANA, whatever you platform. That is connected to whatever funding source you have, which I've referred to, right? Debit, prepaid. And all you do is say, this is the invoice I want to pay. The platform already has the data of where the money needs to go. So your supplier's bank account.
Right.
And we will move the money from the Visa credential in unison with our banking or fintech partners
Right.
into the bank account of the supplier.
So let me ask you this. So let's say I'm a small, medium-sized business. I'm using SAP just because you use that as an example, right? And I connect my virtual credentials, I'm getting better at this again, to that, which are connected to my banks and all this other stuff. That means that I almost never have to leave SAP. I know that it's connected to my Visa virtual credential because I've already set that up. But at some point, no one's going to know that.
Exactly.
It's not going to matter. That's just going to become part of my infrastructure. And I'll be able to make payments, do analysis, receive payments on that, which will all pop up into just one place that I'm using. And I never have to go anywhere else to do this.
And that, Michael, is embedded finance. You just described it.
I did, though, didn't I?
Yes.
So if we do that, though, what is it, if you're abstracting that functionality away from the people that are running their businesses, what does it free them up to do? Why is that a big benefit to them?
So that's huge because all of this is administrative time, right? It is time taken away from my primary goal,
Right.
which is driving more revenue. So every moment that I save can go in to finding the next sales opportunity, which doesn't have to be domestic,
Right.
to finding the next supplier that will give me better terms. So if all of my administrative payable collection processes are within the existing operating solution that I'm used to, I will spend all of this time driving more sales and becoming better businesses.
Which gets back to what you were talking about before. The only real concern, or the biggest concern for businesses large and small, is more business. Can I ask you this too? One of the sort of secular changes that I see changing, right, is again, if you go back 5, 10, even 15 years ago, right, you would see that larger firms, more established firms with, again, bigger balance sheets had access to products, particularly on the financial management side, that allowed them to, I wouldn't say run over, but dominate smaller firms, because even just from a pure accounting and financial management perspective, they couldn't do this. Do these virtual credentials and the connectivity that they create kind of level the playing field at some level so that small and medium-sized businesses can spend more time competing as opposed to kind of just getting run over?
Exactly. And that's precisely where Visa and our partners come in, right? We want to make sure that we provide the power of digitization and all the tools
Right.
to the small business.
To everybody, right?
And the large corporates. The large corporates had the
need
bargaining
this
power to
too.
get it. They
Absolutely.
needed to, but they've got it before. But the small business now gets it, and they get it at fractions of costs, because simply it's demand and supply, right? Now you've got so many more small businesses who want this. It's almost a I want it. It's not like let's think about it, right?
Right.
And that's one thing
But it's kind of
pandemic
like,
did.
I need it though, right? Sorry, you're saying it's
need
kind
it.
of like what the pandemic did.
Pre-pandemic, all of these tools were a good to have.
Yeah, fair enough.
But once that challenge came about, you realize you need to be more liquid, more nimble, and most importantly, I need to find buyers beyond my shores, and I need to do it digitally.
Right. So this is the other secular change that's happening, right? And they're happening together. And maybe they're happening because of each other. And that is, if I'm an SME, let's say I'm in Malaysia, right? I'm close enough to the rest of Southeast Asia that if I just look a little bit broader, I can now sell in Vietnam or import from Vietnam. I can sell to
Absolutely.
Indonesia. I can go as far away as the Philippines. But to be able to do that, I need to have my financial management in order. And without that being sort of frictionless, I can't do that either. But once I expand, again, what's my biggest problem as a business? Expanding revenue. Now I need sophisticated tools to be able to do that. And because the price is dropping down and the accessibility is dropping, now I can. No?
Absolutely, and I'll give you a example
Please.
of how we're kind of delivering this. So think about it. You're a small business in Singapore,
Sure.
and you've got a buyer in the US.
Okay, that's far
right?
away.
Maybe you got a big buyer in the US.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
You want that business,
Right,
right?
right.
So you'll get all the tools to be able to close the deal, fly down there to close the deal if it's big enough, if you need it, and you have all your visa, travel, and entertainment capabilities that deliver this. But now your buyer tells you, you know what? I like it. I like what you're selling me. Please invoice me in US dollars, and I want to pay you in a local bank account
In my local bank account here.
in the US.
In the US, all right.
So the small business wants to sell like a local.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now we're able to provide them with these virtual collection capabilities where the buyer is able to pay them in real time, almost like he's buying from a local SME in the US.
So, but it also does this too, I think. Again, in the old days, big companies, let's just pick Apple because everybody knows it. I'm no bias or anything, but they have bank accounts everywhere in the world. They almost have to because they have suppliers everywhere in the world and they have consumers everywhere in the world. But now, because of these virtual credentials, you can have a virtual bank account anywhere in the world. And if you're going to be transacting in dollars, there's no reason for you to get paid in dollars, bring it back to Singapore dollars, or bring it back to Malaysian ringgit. You may want to leave it there so that if you buy your supplies there and sell to a US customer, it just ends up in dollars. You minimize your FX risk, and you also balance your FX distribution so that you're not taking FX risk anywhere in the world. Is that fair?
Michael, are you from Commercial and Money Movement Solutions in
No, I'm just
Visa?
I'm just a curious guy.
Because you've just explained what we do. So that's exactly what we do.
Can
so
I
if
go
you-
home now? I mean, no, I'm kidding. No, go ahead.
So if you've received US dollars from
Right.
your buyer in US dollars, then maybe you're gonna have to pay another supplier in US dollars.
Right. Why not? Why move the money back? Why
Yeah,
not just
just
leave it
hold it.
there? Right.
Hold it and convert it at the right time. So maybe you don't ever need to convert it because you need to pay out US dollars. Or maybe you're waiting for that right time
Right.
when you want to convert US dollars.
Or maybe you have a view.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe I have an FX view.
Exactly.
I have an FX view. I want to hold dollars.
All these treasury capabilities were in the hands of the large corporates. We have democratized it, and now it's in the hands of small businesses everywhere. And that's the mission.
Do you want? Let's talk about one more thing.
Yep.
Maybe kind of separate from this, but just because I kind of thought it was cool. Do you want to talk about the biometric stuff?
Yes.
Just because it's out there and it's innovative,
cool.
and maybe it doesn't directly impact your business, but I think it's indicative of the way you and your teams, plural, are thinking about innovation and why it's so important. Do you want to just run through this quickly?
Yeah, so fundamentally, I'll say why it's relevant to every business in
Please.
Visa, right? Because what we've seen is the pace of innovation in consumer has made it important to have the pace of innovation even in the business side, because business owners and employees
Are also consumers.
Exactly.
Right. And they want to have the same type
Experience.
of high level experience that they're having in their day-to-day life. Because they're like, if I do this for me, why can't I do it for us? Kind of
Exactly.
thing. Go ahead.
So think about it. Credentials are what the fundamental source is. The card, the account, the hand, the eyes are just form factors.
Right.
So what you saw at the booth now is
Right.
the ability to provision a Visa credential into your palm. So like my right palm
Right.
now has a Visa credential in it.
Which means you can do what?
So when I go and buy coffee in the morning
Right.
from the coffee shop at my office lobby, I just put my right palm on top of the terminal to buy my coffee.
It's like Star Trek. Sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
See, I've got so many things to do every day. I
And
could
you forget stuff.
my wallet.
Yeah.
I could forget my phone.
Right.
There is a very, very, very high probability I will not forget my
My
right
hand.
palm.
Yeah, that's low probability.
Quite. So it's convenient. It's secure, right?
Right.
Because we've already mapped.
It'd be hard for someone to steal it.
Yes, hope so.
Yeah.
And that's how you want to pay. And for that small business or the coffee shop who's receiving money,
Right.
he or she would like to be paid, hopefully, the way his consumer, his customer, his buyer wants to pay.
Right.
So it's opening up opportunities to deliver more business and preference.
I'm going to leave you with this and I'll let you go. I would posit to you that at some point, the touchscreen in my home or in my business is going to allow me to put my hand down and pay you through my virtual credential the same way you pay for your coffee. Roy Choudhury, the head of Commercial and Money Movement, Regional Southeast Asia at Visa. Thank you so much for doing it. That was awesome.
Thank you, Michael.